Okay, I think we'll get started. Is that all right with everyone? Anyone else coming in can just be admitted. If we can make sure they're on mute as they come in, that'd be great. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the HCSA EDI+B Open Forum. We've got some slides, so we'll just jump straight in, and there's introductions, so we'll go through the introductions as we go through the session. We won't do introductions of everyone on the call today. Obviously, we'd need an extra half an hour, wouldn't we? So can everyone see those slides? Brilliant. Okay, so HCSA Equity, Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Network. This is our first open forum, and it's so great to see so many of you here today. Because EDI+B isn't an addition to what we do, is it? It doesn't have a role, it isn't playing a part. Actually, EDI+B is crucial to ensuring everyone is able to thrive and reach their full potential. It's our human right. So what's the agenda today? Well, hashtag what's your story? We're going to hear from lots of people and we're going to hand it over to you because it's all about inclusivity. And as much as we want to share what we're doing and what our plans are, we actually want to hear from you because that's how we learn and that's how we grow. So we'll be going through who we are and what our story is. We'll then hear from Keith Rowley, our keynote speaker. We'll run through our future activity plans from the network, and then we'll hear from two incredible speakers who are going to share their story, Hamish, Makanji and Harvy, Sanghera. And then it's over to you. And then we'll do a little shameless plug of our EDI+B workshop series that's coming up. So what's our story? I'm going to hand over to our lovely members. These are our current members. There's a few people missing from there. So if they're on the call, then I might just ask them to jump in and join in as well. So I'm Karen. I'm the chair of the network. My kids call me the mothership. I'm an animal lover, a dog mummy, garden dweller, activist, conservationist, bookworm, and I love Marmite. Sorry if that offends anyone. Let's go to Janice next.
Hello, I'm Janice Nelson. I'm the Deputy Chair for the network. Yes, I consider myself to be unique. I'm kind, ambitious. I've got a can-do spirit. I think I'm very funny. And the one word I missed off that was fierce, but I thought that might scare somebody. So, yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Janice. Harvy.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Harvy Sanghera, and I'm also one of the deputies for the EDI+B network. So myself, as described in the picture, I'm a mom, family orientated. I'm resilient, loyal, adaptable. I'm compassionate in my leadership. I'm a humanitarian, and I'm independent, and I love to travel.
Thanks, Harvy. Annabelle.
Didn't know you were going to do that. So there were lots of things. My team thought this was hilarious, and they suggested some which I didn't put on the slide. But I am, tenacious, hardworking. I've been very resilient. I've had some huge things thrown at me in my lifetime. But above all, I'd like to think I'm really kind. And my team say I'm kind, sometimes too kind, but it's really important that we're all part of this journey to bring out the best in our teams and to make sure they thrive for the next generation of procurement professionals.
Brilliant. Thanks, Annabelle. Anne.
Hi, I'm Anne Toon, a member of the network. So a few facets, I suppose, about me. I'm a mum and a stepmom. I'm also a carer for my mum. Passionate about music. I've said I'm a cheese fiend, but there's usually wine accompanying that. Passionate about menopause, education in the workplace. A mental health first aider. So again, that's a big passion of mine within the workplace. Love to travel, and unfortunately, probably for some people on the call, I'm a Manchester City fan. not having a great season, yes, I know. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. Keith.
Thanks, Amber. So Keith Rowley, Chief Officer for HCSA in my capacity today, and I'll touch a bit more on that in the update we'll give in a bit. I'm a father of two, a bit of a carer in that capacity, and I'll touch on that in a second. I'm a husband to an amazing lady. I'm enthusiastic. I do try and be honest with integrity. Maybe that's not always how I'm seen. I'm always open to feedback for that. Quite commercial, often think in a commercial way first, which can be both an opportunity and a challenge. I'm an amateur golfer, and for Anne, who's a City fan, I'm an Ipswich Town fan who are doing worse than you, so it's not that bad.
Brilliant, thanks, Keith. I didn't see on the list if we have Beth or Tracy or any of our other members, so if you're on the call, do you want to just jump in and introduce yourselves? Okay, maybe they didn't join then. Okay, so that's us, or some of us at least, and that's our stories. So let's move on to the next slide. So our vision for the group, our network. Our vision is that equity, diversity, inclusion and belonging become embedded into operational activities, procurements and supply chains so that it becomes business as usual. And that's our vision. And it's really important that we have a vision, because if we don't have a vision, how are we going to deliver on anything? How are we going to build those aims and goals? And these are our aims: to celebrate difference, increase awareness and understanding, empower people to bring their full self, remove barriers that prevent or inhibit, to create a true sense of belonging for all our stakeholders. To support the Sustainability Network and the Women's Network, it's really important that we work together. And obviously EDI+B sits within the people element of sustainability, and women and gender sits within EDI+B. So it's that big link, that big system approach. And obviously to support the HCSA and our stakeholders to deliver on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So how are we going to do this? We've got our vision, we've got our aims. Well, actually, we've got 5 pillars, and these are what we're going to be focusing in on as a network, and how we're going to deliver those aims and deliver ultimately that vision. So our 5 pillars are education, training and development, culture transformation, collaborations, research and partnerships. Partnerships really important, because we can't do this in silo. We've got to all come together. We've got to share. We've got to be brave, be curious and work together to ensure that we deliver. And of course, there's that golden thread going through everything of what we do, which is that link to the Sustainability Network and the Women's Network. So, Keith, I'll hand over to you. Do you want me to keep that slide up, or do you want me to just take it down whilst you're speaking?
No one wants to see too many photos of me. That's very helpful. I guess I just wanted to say a few words, really. So I'm really grateful to the network who've got involved in putting this on today. It's taken some time to get to this point, and the group who've been involved in this network, many of you are on the call, chaired by Amber and Janice, have done a huge amount of work to give us a sense of purpose and a sense of direction. So I'm very grateful to their leadership, but also others who've been involved in helping get that network off the ground and getting it to where it's been and participating in that. And today is a bit of a marquee point for that as we begin to build and move forward. So thank you for that. This is really important to HCSA. In terms of HCSA's vision, one of our key tenets was to be more inclusive. That included being more inclusive geographically across geographies, and to include our wider colleagues in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and hopefully they'll get more involved in this group as well. It was also being more inclusive about representing the whole of what we regard as the commercial procurement. I call it supply chain. Maybe I should change my terminology to logistics and materials management profession, but it's everybody across the system at local, regional and national level. And the opportunity here through the networks we've got, we've had a women's network that's been established for a long time, but this group allows us to touch on a wider agenda linked to that inclusivity, which I think is so important to us as a community, to recognise and include everybody and to try and break down some of the things that we're not always aware. So for me in HCSA, one of the real hopes I've got is we can really raise awareness and start to enable some change in the things that we do, and hopefully through you in this group and in the wider system we can enable in change aligned to that agenda, aligned to the themes that Amber's already set out on your side. So hopefully you can get involved, and thanks very much for the direction that's being set. On a personal level, I thought I'd just share a bit of story from my perspective as to why this felt important to me on a personal level. I don't have what I would regard as a disability. I do think I've seen what it's like, interestingly, to be a white middle-class male, which I am, but I've lived in Africa. I grew up in Africa. I went to a school. I've suffered from bullying through that school. I've even suffered from racist bullying, which is quite odd. I've been accused of being various creeds and colours because of where I came from and where I was born, which gave me some empathy for some of the issues others find themselves in, but it felt quite odd to me and gave me a different context to what bullying can result in. So I find that is a good guide and a counsel to what I am, but I wouldn't suggest that I fully understand all of those, and I'm always open to learning. From a disabilities and perspective, whilst I don't suffer from those myself, I am a carer, as I mentioned in my open. My son's had complex needs since he was a child. Since he was first born, we've been in and out of hospitals. It's a big driver for why I participate in the NHS and why I'm here in front of you today trying to enable change. He's had leg length operations, disabilities. He's had challenges sitting in chairs at school throughout his entire career because of the disabilities that he suffers from. More recently, he's been suffering with severe and chronic pain. I listen to government policy who talk about an age group that we're trying to change from 18 to 22-year-olds that around disability benefits. And I see the challenges of that with a child who is 20 years old, is classified in that group around that disability benefit, and is struggling to find ways to get into work and find his direction and purpose because of the constraints over him physically that often aren't seen on the face and are often really hidden. He plays golf with me occasionally. He can go to a jiu-jitsu class, and yet he can be for pain, in chronic pain in really serious circumstances for days, if not hours. Certainly, I remember being with him at Great Ormond Street Hospital post an operation where I had an 18-year-old child on the hospital floor in a bathroom in a hotel room, screaming naked. Not the sort of thing you'd expect an 18-year-old child to do in front of their parents. So I guess I kind of want to see how we can help enable those people to come into our community, because I think they have so much to offer. My second son hasn't got disability issues, but he certainly had mental health issues. He suffered from an eating disorder. It's massively impacted his self-esteem, and he's had amazing care and support to help him recover from that and begin to go on a journey of building his confidence as a gardener. The last example I'd give is my wife's sister was in work. Unfortunately, she's had to stop work because she got cancer. And she's had, through that cancer, had to have a stoma implant input into her, and that's impacted her both her confidence and self-esteem. But I look at her and see the amazing resilience and fight that she puts into life to enable her to move forward. So for me, coming into this group is really important as to how we help, because there will be people like that throughout our community of 4,500, 5,000 people in NHS procurement. And I want to make this a better place and to support them in the way that they can do. I'm not saying HCSA is going to solve all of those problems, but I do hope we can begin to help raise awareness and help people understand how they can support those kinds of people better in the workplace. That's it from me, Amber. Hopefully that was along the right lines, and I hope it helped a little bit in the discussion and conversation to come. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Keith. It's so powerful to hear people's stories. We often attend e-learning and networks where we're spoken at about what we must do and what we can do, but actually to hear people's lived experiences and stories really contextualizes and is such a powerful thing. So thank you so much for having that courage to openly share your lived experience and what you go through and what you live with every day. So thank you so much. Okay,
That's a privilege. Thanks, Amber.
So let me go back to the slides. And let's hear from Janice now. Janice, do you want to just run through the future plans of the network?
Thank you. Thanks, Keith, as well. So we just wanted to share and keep you updated with the progress of our work and get you involved in this. This group is about you and it's owned by you. It belongs to you. So what we want to do for the future is share updates at the HCSA regional event. So you can see the dates in front. And it's not something that we want to talk at you and say, this is what EDI+B is. We want you to share your stories, your experiences, and help us progress the 5 pillars that Karen has already outlined. We'll be sharing podcasts. Myself and Karen has done one. I believe Beth's recently done one. And also continue with the EDI+B webinar series. We'll be sending out the dates to you so that you can get involved and come along and be part of this. And I just wanted to finish with something. I'm a nurse, so I belong to the Royal College of Nursing. And one of the things that Nicola Ranger, the General Secretary, said is equity is our clear ambition. Diversity is an underused asset, and inclusion is our future. And I'm really passionate that we embrace that as part of all the work that we're doing. So we really want you to get involved and own this work. We're just facilitators. We're the platform for you to do this. So yeah, that's our future plans.
Brilliant. Thanks, Janice. So on to our first speaker. Hamish, over to you. Do you want me to keep this slide up or do you want me to take it down while you speak?
Happy for you to take it down. I'm sure people don't need to see my face. So I haven't got many slides today, so hoping just to share my story. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Hamish Makanji. I'm currently head of hospital care at NHS supply chain, but very shortly I'll be moving into a head of category role next week, staying within NHS supply chain. So I'll look forward to working with you in my new capacity. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that today. I wanted to firstly say it's a real privilege to speak to you today and support the work of this network. And thank you for HCSA for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you today. My story is one of my struggles with the feeling of belonging, and more specifically, my search for a sense of belonging, for a community, and for my connection. So belonging will mean clearly different things to different people, whether that means belonging to a group, organization, etc. For me, it's a struggle born out of being, as someone once commented to me, a real mishmash of heritage and background. And to be honest, I kind of get where they're coming from. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time giving you some of the background and explaining, and then talk to you about what that means to me. So please bear with me as I'll navigate through my family history a little bit. So my family originated in India and Gujarat, so we're of Hindu religion. They left India in 1894. So my great grandfather went by boat to East Africa with many other Indians at the time to build railway stations with the British, and they settled in Kenya. 2 generations of my family were born there. So my grandparents, my parents, we had a successful jewelry business, lived in a large extended family of 50 people on I can only call it a compound, which sounds fun, but actually it was a pretty difficult time with the family politics and such. My grandfather spent much of his time and energy fighting for and protecting his children, ensuring they were treated fairly and given the right opportunities. By the early 1970s, Kenya was staunchly independent. There'd been an uprising of sorts. It wasn't really a safe place anymore. The family didn't have Kenyan citizenship. So with many others, we took the opportunity to move to England, settling in London. Whilst the kind of the hustle and bustle of London was really exciting at the time, it was again very challenging for my family, so mainly for my parents and my grandmother. For 5 years, they struggled to get any type of rights here, including citizenship, and that meant no employment, no benefits. So life was a struggle. You had to make ends meet however you could. And often the stories my dad tells me of that time remind me of one of my favorite TV characters, so Del Boy from Only Fools and Horses. So I'll leave the rest to your imagination, but you can imagine what kind of stuff had to be done at the time. Soon after I was born in 1980, we moved to Vancouver, Canada, to explore what at the time was some great opportunities that we were hearing about from friends and family. Canada at the time was growing, developing, booming. Many of our friends from Africa had already settled there, so it made sense in many ways, although leaving England was very difficult. In Canada, my dad set up a successful jewelry business. At one time, he was one of the largest independent jewelers in North America with a chain of shops. And it was quite a mixed dynamic for him, because his success and exposure invited him into new circles he can only imagine, mingling with famous and wealthy people and politicians. But ironically enough, it was those politicians that had to help him get his rights in Canada eventually, because despite running a successful business, employing many people, making significant contributions, his path to citizenship was predictably, by that point, unfortunately, very different to most, and much harder at the time. So even though he had a level of success and etc., those differences didn't go away, and that kind of undertone of being an outsider always remained. In 1995, after some family tragedies and a longing to be back amongst family and friends, my parents decided to up sticks and come back to England. So I was 15 at the time, and as you can imagine, that was an absolute disaster for me, leaving all my friends and family and everything I'd known behind. It's not easy to start again at that age, as I'm sure many of you will know. My sister was 9 at the time, so a little bit easier for her, although still a shock to the system. So we've been here since, now fully settled, and to be honest, it feels like we've never been away, you know. But why have I just rambled on about my family's journey? I kind of wanted to explain what that mishmash of heritage and background meant. So my biggest struggle has been one of belonging. Where do I belong, and where am I from? Because I'm Indian in terms of my religion, but when I go to India, I'm classed as what they call a non-resident Indian, which means you're treated differently in many ways, such as paying different prices at tourist attractions, for example. And we've been out of India for over a century, so I don't feel like I belong to India. My parents are from Africa, but they're not African, and were never accepted as such, so that's out. Our early experience of England was not massively inclusive against a backdrop of kind of racism and institutional discrimination. Wasn't a very welcoming environment. So again, that didn't really feel like home. And then we thought, okay, Canada was the one. Life was great. We were successful and happy. But yet, no matter what we did, we were constantly reminded that we were outsiders. So that was a no. And what all this meant was I grew up with a real feeling of, first of all, privilege of having had all these amazing experiences. So, you know, I don't deny that at all. Yet that sense of belonging was always missing. And this is something that I struggled with for a long time, especially in my teens. So you have to remember, and many of you on this call, I'm sure, will know that it was quite normal for the generations above my generation to move around. You know, if you think about the geopolitical landscape at the time, the migration that was prevalent, there was a lot of movement, and so I'm not unique in that sense. However, those generations were used to it, and they had roots wherever they went. For my generation, it was supposed to be different. We're supposed to be the ones that are settled, following the struggles of the generations before us, but I didn't quite have that. But don't get me wrong, and I wouldn't want you to leave with any other thoughts. I come from a very loving, supportive family, had a very amazing upbringing, and I absolutely feel blessed. But there are constant reminders that belonging sometimes is a little bit of a grey area for me. So I've had a group of friends for the last 30 years, but there will always be a part of that history that doesn't include me. That was before I met them. When I connect with my old friends that I grew up with in Canada, their bond extends far beyond any that I have with them, because clearly I left, and so there was a gap there. So there are some things that are constant reminders that I've had to work through. and being very honest, I'd be lying if I said I'm over it. But what I can proudly say, it's made me stronger. It's made me look at inclusion and belonging in different ways. For example, when I'm recruiting, and it's made me mature in ways that I think very few people get the opportunity to experience. And for that, I'm absolutely grateful. I've also realized that belonging is personal to every one of us. So that there is no wrong. My experience have made me more empathetic, and actually I have a real thirst and hunger for wanting to understand people, their backgrounds, their maps of their worlds. And I think especially as a leader, that's really important in being a good leader. So it's helped me personally and professionally. So yeah, there's no getting away from it. I am a mishmash of heritage and background, but I'm proud of that, because I think what I've finally realized is where I am is where I belong, and that's down to me and no one else. So yeah, that's my story. I hope in some ways that's been thought provoking. It is, only it's my story and only my story. But thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share that. And obviously, if anyone wants to discuss or share any experiences, happy to do that separately or here. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hamish. That's such an interesting background that you have, and thank you for sharing it. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Hamish at all? Simon?
Just really one comment, and that Hamish says, thanks for sharing, buddy. I think you're an amazing individual, what you do, and it is unclear to anybody what's going on behind the mask, isn't it? So thank you for sharing, buddy. I would really appreciate that.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Simon. Any other questions? Don't forget, this is about EDI+B. It's about being curious, and that's how we broaden our understanding. When we know more about each other, we know more in general, don't we? So, Bruce.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Hamish, in your time in HS, what have you felt, hopefully, has changed positively in your experiences from when you came into it, and maybe over time, have you felt things changed for the better? Have you felt they've got worse? Hopefully not. Or do you feel that they've stayed the same, work to do, etc.?
Thanks, Bruce. Very personally speaking, I do think they've gone better. I think, whilst we still live in clearly an age of challenges and a challenging environment, if I go back to my story and some of the things I was hearing from my parents in, for example, the 70s and the 80s, you can clearly see that things have moved on. So I think things are getting better. I think that the danger is better is not good enough, and how do we keep driving that forward? And also, I think with, think about the way the world's moving, and, there's been a lot of media recently about social media and technology. I think the challenges that we face take different forms. So I think for me, I'm always thinking about, we've dealt with a challenge or a problem from yesterday, but that doesn't mean that doesn't exist today in different ways. So we now see that, social media, technology, there's more ways to connect to people, and through those connections come also more opportunities to behave in ways that are not acceptable. So I think my answer is tinged with a yes, it's improving, but equally there's more opportunities and risks that are coming to light all the time. So I think we do need to be mindful of that. But yeah, I think as in a very short answer, I do think things have improved, certainly from my experience.
And in particular within NHS, do you feel that the sort of guide rail support, that barriers to that kind of sort of thing have gotten better in the NHS in particular?
Yeah, I do. I think there's lots. I always see the NHS, and again, just my personal view, but the NHS is very sensitive and personal and emotional for us all living in England, isn't it? It's one of our cornerstones. It's something that we're all passionate and really protective about. But unfortunately, the external environment often influences how the NHS is seen, influences how people behave, and sometimes that seeps into the NHS. I think there are areas where the NHS can do better. So I think if you look at, certainly senior leadership levels, is there balanced representation there. I think there's plenty of evidence to say not quite, not yet, although it's improving. So I think the NHS, as I say, is improving. I think there's challenges there, but I don't think those challenges are unique to the NHS. I think the NHS often is a representation of the external environment.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Hamish.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bruce. Janice.
Thank you, Hamish, for sharing that. And I think we underestimate the power of the sense of belonging. And I wanted to ask you, and congratulations on your new role and appointment. As a leader, how do you cultivate that within your team? How do you embrace that cultural safety in healthcare? It's something that I'm really passionate about, and I just really would like to understand how you are doing, how you propose to do it, and any tips, because this is all part of the learning.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because a lot of it is also dependent on people's personalities and appetite to do it. Because, I think if we're being honest with ourselves, that there are some people who, and it's very acceptable, want to come to work and do their role and that's it. And that's absolutely fine. And that's what we want from them. I think to foster that kind of culture, some of the things I've been trying to do is develop a better understanding of our team, of my team. So things like, as I said, maps of the world. So, you understand where people have been to understand where they are, to then understand where they want to go, and just understand people's background a bit more. And I think, to be fair, networks such as this, the real promotion of ED&I across the general workforce and life helps, because it's brought it to the forefront and it's taken a little bit of pressure off leaders to be that driving force, because now it's a accepted, important, critical part of life. So I think for me, I won't go into all the theories and all the various things I do, but I think that in one line, it's how do I get my team and my colleagues to understand each other better. So to Simon's comments, you don't know sometimes what's going on behind the scene. We all know that, many people are different when they come to work, not in a bad way, but there might be, it might put a bit of a facade on or whatever it might be. So I think it's really important to foster that deeper connection, and that for me comes through better understanding. And there's lots of tools and different workshops and things you can do to do that. Happy to talk about that more.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. Keith.
I was just picking up on that last point, Hamish. I mean, your sense of belonging, I feel like I kind of can empathise to a certain degree with that, because I feel like I was a child who was born in England, grew up in Africa, probably had a different sense of privilege because of the way I went to there. So kind of recognising that. But interesting, I've always found I don't feel like I really belong anywhere, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? Other than the family of the NHS and my close family, I've kind of found those connections. But just reflecting on those last points, I think those tools of the how, getting to understand those could be quite useful in terms of that, because I think we talk a lot about the intent to do that. Sometimes it's hard to pick up on what are the examples of how you could do it and how could we all learn from that to practice. So I might pick up with you offline, actually, Hamish, and just get some of those ideas of how you've done those, because some of those little simple techniques are ones I've not come across. The maps one sounded really interesting, but I think maybe that's something we could share more as a group, because sometimes it's the how do you do it that we feel like we trip over. We're all out there trying to research ways of doing the how, but there's so many competing agendas. Sometimes you miss the opportunity. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Just the other thing, Keith, I would say on that, happy to pick up offline, but what I've also found really interesting recently is around personal values. So obviously we're all in organizations that will have our own values and organizational values, which are really important. But actually understanding what is important to every individual, I think I found really powerful, because, I'll give you an example, and obviously I won't name names, but I've got someone in my team who had experience working with underprivileged people and then into kind of trade unions. And actually that person operates from a basis of fairness for colleagues and employees in everything they do. It's at the forefront of every single thing they do. And understanding that brings a new light to some of the conversations that I have with that person, because otherwise I might look at them very differently. I might look at them as being sometimes a disruptor, or being, being overly challenging, or whatever it might be. But actually understanding that has now completely reframed the conversations I've had with that person, and allowed me to build a better understanding and just a better relationship with them. So I think personal values is also really important, and I think sometimes that those get overlooked because we focus on organizational values.
We do. I think you're spot on, but I also think we spend so much time in the doing of the job that we don't spend the time doing the people, and therefore we don't really understand the people. And because we don't understand the people, we don't know what they're bringing to work, because all we see is what they present at work, which is often a facade. It's a screen. It's a mask. It's what you're not seeing is what's going on that actually affects people's behaviour, how they interact, what they think, what they're saying, and because we don't appreciate that, I find myself at times, you can find yourself quite selfish about my reality, and because you're not aware of someone else's reality, your interaction can become quite complex, and you can get it wrong quite often. I've found myself getting it wrong because I'm spending too much time in me, not enough time in that shared space with others. So I think that kind of work's really, really powerful, Hamish. I'd like to learn a bit of some of the techniques you've applied there. I've tried some as well, and maybe there's more we could share in that space. So thank you for sharing it. It got me thinking.
Thank you. And I think from the network's point of view, we were really passionate about including belonging, because we can be equitable, we can be inclusive, we can be diverse, but creating that sense of belonging, that's so important for bringing it all together. Thanks for that question. Thanks for answering, Hamish. I hope I get this right. Valley? Is it Valley, or is it? Because I know some people always call me Amber, Keith, because that's the first name that comes up. So is it Valley or Tosh?
No, it's Tosh. It's Tosh. Yes, so it's Tosh. Thank you. So, hi, Hamish. So yeah, thank you for sharing your inspiring journey. My question was around, in terms of from your experience and stuff, if there was one thing to embed and implement within EDI, within the NHS, what would it be?
The one thing I probably take away from my story, and this is probably links back to my struggle, is for the longest time I thought my journey and the various changes and all the things I've been through was the problem, if you will, or the blocker or the challenge. And I think it's actually the opportunity, and it's it's what's made me who I am today. So I know it's hard because it's difficult, especially when your experiences might be negative, harmful, whatever. It might be hard to turn those into positives, but I think that's what you have to do, right? I've always been taught to, the past is the past. You've got to decide what you take from it. And so I've tried to take the positives from it and then influence forward. So, you pay it forward. So that's why I want to understand people better, because I've learned the hard way that people who haven't understood me have maybe not treated me in the way that I'd like to be treated. So I think the two things are, what are you taking from it? What do your experiences make you? But then also, how do you then take that to influence how you treat other people, how you operate? The NHS we're all operate in such complex organizations in a hugely complex landscape. And I don't know about all of you, but we always hear about, your political nous and your influencing skills and your stakeholder engagement and all these things. And I think EDI is a big part of that. I think that really helps that. So I think there's what we're talking about here is not just helping you personally, but also professionally, and making our jobs, which are all hard, a little bit more sustainable and enduring.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. And thanks so much, Hamish, for sharing your story. So let's go back to the slides. And next up, we've got Harvey. So Harvey, just guide me through when you want me to change the slides.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, you can go to the first slide. Okay, so guys, I was thinking, do I need to do some slides or not? Because there were so many stories that were coming to mind, and I was going to at first not do slides, but I've decided to do slides to keep me focused. Some of the things that Hamish has mentioned really touch with me as well, because obviously they're the things that I've experienced. Belonging, definitely very important to add to the EDI element as well. So for my slides, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the characteristics of EDI and how I've had multiple touch points from the various characteristics throughout my life. So starting with my life and then obviously going on to my career. So that's how I'm going to do my talk. So growing up, I had similar growing up experiences as Hamish described as well. So my dad came to the UK, I think in the 60s they came. He was 17 or 16 years old at the time, and obviously there were some Del Boy moments and stories he told me as well about what they had to do and how he had to get his first job. He came over because my dad's sister had got married to somebody, and that individual, my uncle, had won some sort of lottery or stake they used to do back in the day to come to the UK. So he had won something, and that's how he first entered the UK. And then obviously my dad's sister brought him to the UK as family. And then my dad got married quite young when he came to the UK, and he went into work straight away. So his whole life has been work, 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 nothing else. He doesn't take any breaks. He doesn't take a day off sick. He's never claimed any benefits, and we didn't even know anything about benefits throughout the whole of our childhood. It was very much work. And I remember when my dad got his 25-year presentation at work, he was really proud. He got to watch everything. So growing up, I just remember work, work, work. So how that impacted us as children, obviously, we were a family of 6. So 4 sisters and 2 brothers. My first brother died at a very young age, 6 months. Obviously, I didn't know about that brother. I never met that brother. And then I was the 3rd oldest, but 2nd oldest sibling. So it was my 2nd brother, and then it was myself. So back in those days, because everything was around work, saving money, getting on the property ladder, making a name for yourself, sending probably money home to India, to your family to support them. My dad did send my brother off to India. So my brother was born in the UK, but he got shipped off to India as babysitting. So my grandparents raised my brother. So there was a 2-year age difference between me and my brother. And then when I was born, the similar thing happened with me as well. So my mum was telling me the story about how I was very young, and my dad took obviously her and myself to India, and then he literally said to my mum, we've got to carry on working, we have to save money, so the children have to stay here. So I got left in India for about 5-6 years of my early life. So I grew up with my grandparents, and I just remember vague memories of when my grandfather died, and I was very close to my grandma. And then when I was at the age of, I think about 6 maybe, my uncle came to India, and I went to school there for a little bit as well, and he brought me back to the UK. And I remember being at the airport, and it was like, oh, that's your mom, that's your dad, that's your brother, that's your other sister. So I'd never met my sister. So she was 2 years younger than me. So that's how I kind of entered the UK. So again, I was a bit like, mom, dad, sister. It was a lot for me to take in, learning the language as well. So I remember doing a little bit of English at my school, which was next door to my house, but I had to learn everything. So I literally got put into primary school. And I remember I picked up the language really quickly. So I picked up English. I was quite good at primary school. I made a couple of close friends. And I really kind of adapted really well, considering what I'd kind of experienced. But my grandma had come over as well. I was very close to my grandma. And then I grew a very strong relationship with my younger sister, who was 2 years younger than me. So me and her was very, very close. So growing up, in our culture, so my family is Punjabi Sikh, so we come from the Punjab. So I heard the stories of the partition in 1947 in India. I heard of how my dad was actually officially born in the part what's known as Pakistan, and then how they were told a year before that there was going to be a potential war kickoff and they need to come down to move into India and settle there. So I remember all these stories growing up, and I remember as a child, my family was always about honor, respect. You can't do this. People are going to look bad on you. It was always about the family name, how people would perceive us. So we had a very, very strict upbringing. And sometimes when I've been on some of these talks and other people from my cultural background potentially or others have spoken, they always talk about how their family really supported them with their career development, supported them with their education. And I always think, really, because that wasn't the case for me, it was so different. So early on, I experienced the difference between sex. Obviously, if you're a man, these things you can do. If you're a woman, these things you can do. And my life was always, I was thinking, I'm going to, when I get older, potential arranged marriage was on the cards, get married, and then probably do the same things that my mum had done and other people had done. However, my mum was a working mum as well, so she'd always worked, and my dad's always worked. So but as I grew up around different people, I kind of noticed how we were treated differently at home. So my brother was always treated differently. He had tuition, he had support for his education. He had everything kind of set out for him, whereas me and my sister weren't really considered much. We had to do a lot of chores. So I remember I had to help my mum a lot. And my dad would take us to do random things. Like my dad would always be fixing a fence, changing the oil in the car. And he'd always say, you need to watch this because you might have to change a tire. You need to watch this. You might have to fix the wall. I used to think, really, all of these things, he just made us stand next to him and watch everything he used to do, because my dad was a right grafter. And then that was my childhood, so I always noticed there was a difference. However, one of my escapisms was music. So when my parents were out, we'd watch obviously music, we'd have Top of the Pops on, we'd listen to the music, and music was my freedom. And I remember the Freddie Mercury song, I Want to Break Free, and that song really resonated with me. And I used to think, oh my God, I really want to break free from this life. Like, I can't do nothing. I wasn't allowed to have a weekend job. I wasn't allowed to go and see my friends. I wasn't allowed to go to prom. I wasn't allowed to go and meet any of my friends, because my dad would always hear horror stories of other girls doing this and other girls have done that, and they've just disrespected the family. So my dad would just had us on literally lockdown. That was my life, my childhood. When I went to school, I never experienced any issues with race. Bizarrely enough, yet I'd heard so many stories from my dad about how these people do this, these people do that. Because when my dad bought his first house for £2,000, it was on the same road as Coventry City Football Club. So my dad would always talk about, no, you can't go to town because the skinheads are out and it's racist and they're going to attack you. And, you know, everyone's racist out there. You can't be walking around the streets. You can't be doing this. So it was always protection, protection, protection. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. It was very much like that the whole of my childhood. So when we went to school and college, I really embraced it because it was my freedom. It was my get out of the house. It was my meet different people. And I really connected with different people from different backgrounds, and had friends from different backgrounds. And I absolutely love school. I love college. And I never, ever took a day off school or college. I literally wanted to be there all the time because it was my escapism. So at school, that's when I started gaining a wider exposure to diversity, people's different perspectives, experiences. And I felt, you know, I want to do this. I want to do, you know, and things that I wanted to do in my career. Like we all have those moments where we want to do things. So I was, you know, at one point I was saying I want to be a solicitor, I want to be a police officer, or maybe I was thinking I could escape going to the army. So I just used to have all these ideas, but everything used to be shut down all the time. Oh no, you can't do that, because if you go in the police, this could happen. You know, you could be dealing with, you know, bad people. And then I said, okay, I want to do law, criminal law. My brother would say, oh, well, no, you can't do that because you might be on a big case and then they might come and attack the family. It was always, everything was negative. You can't do this, you can't do that. So that's kind of like how our childhood was. So in my teens, I also had a lot of responsibility because our parents put a lot of responsibility on us in our culture. So my grandma had moved from India, so she was living with us as babysitting, obviously here in England at the time. So she was in her 80s, she was diabetic, and I used to have to support her a lot, being the oldest daughter in the family. And then later on in my life, my mum had two more kids. So my mum had my two youngest sisters, and there was a big age gap between myself and my two youngest sisters. So I remember, you know, we had to change nappies. We had to do all these things, you know, babysitting for what. So the first, you know, sister was exciting because it was a baby. But when she had the second one, it was becoming a bit of a chore. It was like, can you go make a milk bottle? Can you go and do the food? It was just constant. And then my grandma, so it was the caring aspects of it. So I became a carer. So you know, for somebody elderly, I became a carer for 2 young children at a really young age. And then I think one of the real biggest impacts was when I was at college, because they just about let me go to college, and that was a whole big hoo-ha, because my dad would say, you know, if you want to go to university, when you get married, if your husband lets you, you can go to university. It was very much like that. And then when my sister was 16, she suffered a brain hemorrhage. So she'd just started at my college, and my sister had a brain hemorrhage, and she was literally on the death's door, because we were waiting around for ages for the ambulance and everybody to come, and they thought she'd taken drugs, so they misdiagnosed her. She was sat on the wrong ward at Coventry Hospital for ages, and then they realised actually she was having a brain hemorrhage. And I remember the consultant's name now to this day. It was Mr. Stanworth, and he was literally in the car park that day, and he was just about to go home when they bleeped him in and said, "There's a case here." Because I was reading booklets and saying to my mum, I think she's got meningitis. I think it could be this, because she was having all these symptoms. Yet when the ambulance came, they were just being very casual with her. Oh no, it could just be, you know, has she taken drugs? You don't know children these days. It was very dismissive. You know, what was going on with my sister. And you know, at this point, as you know, I was very close with my sister. So she had this brain hemorrhage. She got taken into hospital, and she was on a life support machine for about 3 weeks. And you know, at one point they wanted to switch the machines off. And I remember, because we were at college, my sister did have a lot of friends. I had a lot of friends. We were quite popular, to be fair, at school and college. We got on with a lot of people. I always was able to get on with people. I never really had many enemies. So a lot of people came to visit my sister in hospital. And again, I experienced from my family side, it was very much, who's that black person, who's that white person, who's this person here, who's this boy, who's this lady, who's this man. They look a bit old to be at college. But at college, we used to have mature students. So again, instead of thinking people have actually come to see my sister, my family was just questioning me constantly, who's the man, who's the lady, who's this boy, who's this girl. It was very much, who's that, you know, who's this white person, who's this black person, who's this mixed race person. It was just constant, relentless, even whilst my sister was on a life support machine. So I remember she thankfully made it out of the hospital after 3 weeks. She got left permanently disabled. So then that added to my caring responsibilities. I now had to support my disabled sister as well, because obviously my mum and dad had to return to work. My brother was at university. And again, that was another responsibility for me. At this point, my sister very much kind of started rebelling. So she was a bit like, you know, life's too short. I've just nearly died. She went to rehabilitation for 6 weeks in Milverton Hospital in Leamington Spa. And she just got really rebellious with life. And she just said, look, life's too short and I don't want to live like this. Our family's too strict. I can't do this. I can't do that. So she then started going a little bit off with her friends and started doing a bit of her own thing. And obviously my parents couldn't control everything because my brother was at university. And then my college had then come to an end, and I was told I wasn't allowed to go to university and I had to get a job with my mum. So I'll come on to my first job after I talk about the next really big impact in my life. So this was in my late 20s. So at this point, I'd left home because my sister was about 17 when she decided to leave home and go against my family. So my family was really, really strict. And I then was really scared, didn't know what to do. And then I decided to support her and leave home because I thought, you know, she's disabled. How's she going to look after herself? And I kind of made a bit of a decision to go against my family and also leave home with my sister. So I was about 19 years old and she was about 17. So I literally left home with nothing, just a bag of clothes, and had to make my way through life. And at the time, we moved to an area. It was quite a rough area, to be fair. It was a predominantly, let's say, one of these mainly white council estates. And I was actually really scared because of all the stories that my family had been telling me. However, what I was really surprised with was I actually had no issues on that estate. So I would, you know, the estate we lived on, it was we were on a cul-de-sac and there was like drug dealers on the road, people's houses would be getting raided. I'd see people jumping on police cars. So it was quite petrifying, and I had to walk through that to get to work, had to walk through that to get to bus stops and things. Yet nobody ever said anything to me or my sister. We were very much supported, and it was very much like a community vibe. So I didn't actually personally experience any racism like I thought I would. And that's where the next big impact around the racism happened. So the next bit is the murder of Anthony Walker. So Anthony Walker's grandma lived on the same estate where I lived, Mrs. Bin. So she was a lovely, lovely lady, and Anthony would come down from Liverpool. I knew Anthony's whole family. I knew Anthony and his grandma for over 10 years, basically. You know, I knew all his sisters. I knew his uncles, his aunties. His uncle lived there. I knew his cousins. So I knew everybody, and I knew Anthony, and he would be very nice to me. I'd be down their house quite often, the grandma's house. She used to make Sunday dinner, invite me and my sister over. She was very accommodating, really lovely lady. And I was in my late 20s then at this point. I'd left home and I'd had I'll go through my career separately. And I was working at the NHS. I was working at the NHS then at Coventry Hospital. And it was in 2005. And I heard that Anthony Walker had been attacked in Liverpool in Hoyton. So Anthony was such a lovely lad. He was very polite. And, you know, like sometimes when people have passed away and people go, oh, he was such a nice person and this person was this, and they just say nice things. He genuinely was a lovely, lovely young chap. He wanted to do law, similar to what my passion was, and he was just done his A-levels, and he was waiting for his results, and he and his cousin were attacked at 11 o'clock at night whilst him and his cousin was walking his girlfriend to a bus stop because she was white and he was black. So they were waiting outside a bus stop and they had some racist comments thrown at them from the two individuals. And it started from there really, and then they were ambushed in the park, and he was attacked in the head with a pickaxe. And I remember at Coventry Hospital then, they were very supportive of that situation because they knew how close I'd grown, because they were like my family. The whole of Anthony's family was like my family, because obviously I'd left home at this point, me and my sister, and we didn't really have much family, so I was very close with his grandma. And all his uncles and aunties, and they were very supportive of me, and I managed to go to the whole of the court case. So the trial happened in Preston Court, and then the two individuals that were convicted was obviously it was Michael Barton, the brother of a footballer, Joey Barton from Manchester City, and then Paul Taylor, and it was an unprovoked attack. And what was really surprising was the two individuals actually went to school with Anthony and his sisters, yet they went and decided to attack him and kill him on this night. So that was my first experience. It was very similar to the Stephen Lawrence case, and it was very impactful because I went to every court case. Like I said, it was in Preston. I stayed at his relatives' houses over there a few times, and it was really interesting to see how the whole trial unfolded. If you can go on to the next slide, please, Amber. So this is some pictures from the internet, which you can find if you want to look at the story of Anthony Walker. So Anthony Walker's there, obviously that was the front of the park where he got attacked. He was with his cousin Marcus, who I knew, because obviously Marcus lived with his grandma in the house where I lived. And they're the two individuals that attacked him. It was a massive funeral at Liverpool Cathedral, because one of his uncles, girlfriend, her mum was actually the mayor of Liverpool at the time as well. So it was a humongous funeral. There was hundreds and hundreds of people there, if not thousands, attended the funeral. And then there's obviously a picture I happened to come across on the internet of me and my sister. So that's my sister, who I still support now to this day, to be fair, who'd left home. And then obviously I was there with her at this funeral. You can go on to the next slide now, please, Amber. Thank you. So that was my life experience. So I would say I went to the University of Life, and I experienced all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds, and seen obviously how EDI can impact you. It impacts us all throughout our lives. So career-wise, when I first started noticing things at work was obviously when I was 18, like I said, I left college and then I was told that I was going to get a job with my mum. So my mum worked for a German company and making window regulators for Land Rover. So it was Bros Limited. That was my first ever job. And it literally was all arranged for me. So I was told, right, you know, you're not going to go on to university. You're going to go on to get this job now because mum's arranged it with a lady it's her manager, and if you mess around in the interview and you don't get this job, we're going to hear about it. So you're going to be literally going to this interview and you're going to be getting this job. So I remember going to the interview, and I even remember the perfume the lady was wearing. It was Estee Lauder Beautiful, and I still remember it to this day. And her name was Jackie. She was actually a really, really nice lady. And I went to the interview and I got the job. Obviously, that was my first real job, and it was in a factory. So it wasn't as bad as some of the factories some of the Asian ladies had to work in. It was quite a diverse group of people there at the job, but I just didn't like the job. So I was making window regulators for Land Rover, and it was like a production line. So I was literally going round and round in circles like a hamster on a wheel, and I absolutely despised that job. It was literally, you know, I had to make, I think, 65 window regulators per hour, and you was timed, and they'd stand there and watch you how many you made. So it was literally like more than one a minute. So you had no time to do anything. If you wanted to go for a break, you had to put down, oh, I'm going for a break. And it was at that point I realized workplace, like the difference in workplace. So obviously when I went to the plush offices, it was a very nice clean German factory. When I went to the offices, obviously I didn't see any Asian or black people there. I didn't see anyone of color in the big offices, the fancy bits. You know, even the receptionist lady was a nice blonde haired lady. There was it was all the Asian people, and all the people of the ethnic background seemed to be on the floor literally doing all the grafting and doing all the hard work, and I didn't enjoy that job at all. So I started inquiring. I was thinking, well, if this is my job, this will have to be. I'm going to inquire, how do I get to the top? What do I need to do? So I made some inquiries, and then they said things like, oh, well, you know, ideally you need to be speaking German. That would be helpful, and all the rest of it. And then after that, I just thought, you know what, this isn't really for me. I don't really want to progress here, and I didn't really like it how we were treated. So very shortly after that, like I said, because I'd also at this point left home, this is how, you know, the home thing and the job site, I just started the job and I then left home. I literally had a little bit of qualifications. I had my GCSEs, I had my business and finance with Spanish as a language, and I then literally had to get on the career ladder. So a lot of times they asked for experience, so I didn't have the experience. So I went and did a lot of work with agencies. So I remember, you know, I had to walk to jobs because I didn't have money at the time. I was 19 years old. You know, I didn't have my family support. I had to walk to jobs and people wouldn't know. So similar to what we just mentioned earlier, like you don't know what someone's going through. So I would get up really early, walk for miles to get to my job, and it was in the call center for DVLA. They wouldn't know that I'd left home 2 hours ago, and I'd literally walk. Sometimes I didn't have food, or I didn't have money to even probably have lunch. Because I didn't know about benefits, because it wasn't taught to us. It was literally, you have to get a job. So I always had work. And then back in the day, the benefit system was very much like, if you've got a job, you can't be claiming benefits because you could cross over, which means you could be cheating benefits. So I always just never bothered to really claim any benefits. It was always, I had a job, and then because my sister had then been put on benefits, she was getting disability allowance, you know, we had a roof over our head and we had food and it was all fine. So that's kind of how I did my career. So I started off having multiple jobs in, you know, I worked in call centers, I worked at the councils, I worked in banks, and it was one job after the other. And I think it was a very short period of time, for 6 months, I did have to claim benefits because I wasn't getting enough income through my jobs. And that was, I felt like a failure at the time. When I had to do that, I felt really bad. I had to go and claim benefits. I felt, you know, it wasn't really something that my parents had taught me to do. And I really did feel bad, and I was thinking, you know, I need to get a job. Like my dad's always had a job, I need to get a job. So I then landed at Coventry Hospital, and that was my first role in the NHS. So it was in 1999 officially, and it was in cardiothoracic theatres. And then they took me on there in that role as a permanent role because I did really, really well. So for me, I always like to pick up things really quickly. I like to, I'm adaptable, I'm resilient, I'm loyal. I don't take the mick when I'm at work. I like to get the job done. I take on more than I probably can manage at times, but I won't complain about it because that's just the way it was taught to me. You can skip to the next slide, please, Amber. So that's basically, you know, what happened with work-wise. So I had all these different experiences. So, you know, on my career, personal, so I experienced the biases, the diverse perspectives of different people. I had to improve my own self-awareness and empathy, and I also had to address my own biases because they were taught to me as a child. So sometimes I would look at people and think certain things, or I would think, oh, what if, or are they going to? So I had to, we all have our own biases that we don't recognize. So there was myself looking at people sometimes, but then once I've spoken to the person, it kind of go. So I always treat people at face value. I always I don't care about your background, if it's you, if you're of this background, if you're of this culture background. I've got so many friends from mixed, diverse backgrounds, and I absolutely love it. I love traveling, going to different countries. I love getting involved in different cultures. I like trying different foods. So for me, it was like I'd never like to put someone into like a pigeonhole, say, because you're from that background, that's basically what you are. I always like to listen to people's stories and understand and get to know them. So that was, my experience. I had to grow myself, had to understand my own biases, and then obviously help other people address their bias as well. Workplace dynamics. I think, definitely I noticed lack of representation in leadership roles growing up throughout my career. I've had 25 years in the NHS now, and I've spent a number of years in each job band because I've not felt confident that I should maybe just go for a higher band. I've always thought, what, I really need to prove myself. I need to gain this experience. And I always like to be in a position in my career where I can actually do the job that I'm asking someone else to do. So if they weren't there, I can cover for them or I can support them. I'm not one of these people that just like to boss people like, oh, you go and do this and you go and do that. I've done it, I've been there, I understand where they're coming from, and I like to kind of get to know that. So that's always been one thing that I always take, can I do the job that I'm asking someone else to do? What are their challenges? What can I do to support them? So I'm very supportive and very compassionate. And I've also experienced in my career middle management. There's a lot of issues with middle management. So throughout some of the work that I've done with boards, I've done with senior execs, it's always seems to be an issue and miscommunication at middle management. When I've spoken to chief executives, when I've spoken to chairmen, when I've sat in board meetings, when I've been invited through my mentoring, they're very different. It's nothing like what you see at the coalface. It's nothing like what you see on the ground level, what we experience on a day-to-day basis. Their mentality, their mindset is totally different. So I always relate to these people. Somehow I always get to speak to them. They always like to talk to me. I can, give them my shared experience, my lived experience, and they understand. And then it makes them, I've done reciprocal mentoring where it supports them as well as it's supporting me. So, and that's been one of the key themes I found: middle management, miscommunication and causing problems. And then it obviously, culture kills strategy. We all know that. Career opportunities, I faced the glass ceiling many a times, because I have dealt with a couple of individuals where it's a bit of a job for the boys, and no matter what you do, you're never going to get that job. They've made it very difficult for you. Yeah, I've got all the experience on paper and I've actually proven it. There's always certain individuals, they'll look at them and go, oh, that person got lots of potential. But yet when it comes to you, it's like, oh, well, you just need to do this. If you can just go off and do this course, if you just go and do this study, that's the differences I've experienced in my career. So it's, have you got the potential? Or in some cases, oh no, you need to prove you've got the experience. So which is it? So that I found always a problem. I've also found that myself and other individuals I've spoken to, sometimes you always have to go above and beyond. You always have to do 20 different things before you can prove yourself, whereas other people might do one or two good things and they're praised and they're promoted because they've got this potential. But oh no, you haven't done enough, can you go and do more? So that's what I've experienced, and that's what I've heard from other people's experiences around their diversity and inclusion at work. And then what I've also realized in my career is having allyships. So it's very, very important. So I've met some amazing leaders in my career. Some people have been, really, really supportive. And if it weren't for those individuals, I don't think I'd be where I am. I've always, just got on with it, done the job. I've been in, earlier on in my career, I've been in meeting rooms where people have looked at me and I've had to look at my meeting, say, should I be in this room? Because obviously I'm the only Asian young lady in that room. And I've looked around, I've done contracts for the board early on in my career, and I've had senior people look at me and go, you're really knowledgeable, how come you're only getting paid this much? I've always seen there's a bit of a difference with pay as well. you know, when I was delivering multi-million-pound contracts, when I was sitting with the chairman of the trust, when I was a very young, I was in my early 20s, delivering massive board development contracts, 20 million pound medical devices, off-site record storage contracts. And I've even had a managing director sit in those meetings with me and said, Harvey, the project manager is getting paid more than you. I can't believe you're doing all this work and they're only paying you that. And that individual has still supported me to this day. And that person was a manager of a hospital. So I have built really good relationships with people. So I think allyship is so, so important. And these individuals, you know, I've made a phone call once to a chief executive and I phoned his PA and said, does this person remember me? I need their help. Can they do me a reference? And literally within 10 minutes, that chief executive phoned me back and I was so surprised. So I'm very loyal and I really, you know, support everybody. And I also really love it when people support me as well. And I just think that allyship has been a really key driver for me. And I think it's just really important to build these relationships with people. And then overcoming challenges. I've done a lot in my career then to support EDI+B. So, you know, we had cultural development at my previous trust. I did a 12-month program on RES, so workforce, race equality standards. I was a task and finish group for recruitment, retention and career advancement. So I've done a lot of work to give back as well, you know, to support other individuals that are up and coming. So it's not about just getting yourself up the ladder. It's always about helping others along the journey as well, because you don't know what battle someone's going through until you speak to them. So it's always nice to help others. And then leadership representation. I've always been motivated by other leaders, some great leaders that I work with who have always said to me, no, you have got it in you, you should apply. So I think for me now, I'm getting to a certain point in my career, I do want to be more confident. I do want to do things like this, do more speaking, and I do want to get out there a little bit more and be more visible. And that's my story. And then if you just go to the next final slides, it's just, I've just left a closing thought for everybody. And I always understood Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think if you can meet that for individuals, that's basically, it's as simple as that. Everyone's got psychological needs, everyone's got safety needs, everyone's got love and belonging, everyone wants self-esteem and self-actualization. And I just think that that's it really, that's all you need to do.
Thank you so much, Harvey, for sharing your story. Let's go to questions. We've only got 15 minutes left, so I'll just stop sharing. Does anyone have any questions for Harvey at all? Keith?
It's not a question so much as thanks, Harvey, because there's a lot to take in and a lot to cover, and I'm kind of trying to see and reflect on it all and process quite a lot of it. But just thank you for sharing that powerful story. I don't have a question because I'm trying to digest it alongside some of what Hamish talked about, because there's a lot of cross themes as well. But yeah, really powerful and quite insightful. But yeah, so thank you was all I was going to say.
It's so powerful, isn't it, for that vulnerability to be shared, and that story. Hamish?
Yeah, thank you, Harvey. That was amazing, really. Just, I think some of your experiences with your family when you're younger, being a girl in the house is something that I've heard as well. Obviously, being similar culture, how has that influenced how you would treat kind of the next generation, whether it's your own kids or, you know, other children, in terms of their place in life and how they're treated and kind of, you know, what's instilled to them at a young age?
So I've got a daughter myself now. She's 10 years old, going on to 11. So when she was young, she had a T-shirt which said "Girls can do anything." So that's my attitude. So I always encourage my daughter to be open. You know, I encourage her to speak to me about things. I don't want her to hold things in. I want her to be open with me, no matter how bad it is, no matter how she thinks I might react. I want her to always have that open relationship with me. And I always encourage her to say, look, you can do anything you want. You know, I don't pressurize her around school, because there's so many entrepreneurs in the world, isn't there? Like, look at Alan Sugar, his background, where he came from. So I think life can throw you lemons and you can make lemonade, or you can just basically dwell on what you've been through. So I think it's always about getting over it and moving on. So I think I've been able to compartmentalize things and go, right, that happened, I dealt with it and I moved on. And I actually think today was like one of the first times I've gone really that deep into my story and actually done it without bringing any tears. I think there was a moment where something was going to happen, but people don't know, do they? They see you at work, you turn up, you show up, and that's how we're being taught to be. But nobody knows really what you've suffered or what you've gone through or what you've been through at work. And I don't really want people to know that either all the time, because it's not about getting sympathy. It's about just challenging myself all the time, every day. So I just take each day as it comes. Yeah, and I just want my daughter to be the same.
Thank you. Amazing.
Thank you so much. Janice?
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you for sharing your story and, you know, really going deep, because you have to make yourself vulnerable to be able to do that. And actually, in doing that, you empower others. You never know the power of what you're saying. People might not speak up here or even put stuff in the comments, but actually what you're saying, irrespective of whether it's about the culture, will resonate with others. You know, and it's empowering, and actually it's quite healing as well for others to hear that. So you know, as one would say, big up yourself for that. So thank you.
Yeah, it was, I went on a leadership program in my last role, which was supported by my mentor, and it was in that program we had to be vulnerable. So the leader you are today, you are that person because of your life experiences, because of what you've been through, what you've encountered. That makes you the leader you are today. So I think I bring some of those life experiences into my job, into how I treat other people, and also how I expected to be treated. And that was a very vulnerable point, because you really understood why people are the way they are, because we were all on this course, we all had to do a timeline and our lifeline, and that's why I'm able to talk about it.
And actually, I just want to end with saying that that's your superpower. You know, your vulnerability is that. So thanks.
Thanks, Janice. Thanks, Harvey. Anne?
Yeah, thanks, Harvey. I was really, really touched by your story, and Keith and Hamish before, thanks for sharing yours. And I think as each of you spoke, although our backgrounds are very, very different, I found synergies in some of the things that you were saying in my life story. And I think as leaders, if we can be brave enough to share that with our teams and the people that we work with, then for me, that's what leads to authentic leadership. And if people can see that in individuals, then they're empowered themselves to share the same. And if there's only one aspect that we can kind of find synergy with, then great. That might lead us to talk about the areas that we don't have commonalities or shared experience. So I think it's all good. So thanks very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Simon? Give you a few minutes to take off mute. Do you want to pop your question or comment into the chat? Okay, so thank you so much, Harvey. Really inspiring and inspirational story. So on to our next slide. It's over to you. We've heard these stories, and broadening that understanding and knowledge, being inquisitive, sharing, being curious, being bold, being brave. That's how we learn, and that's how we can really become and create a sense of belonging. So what's your story? We'd love to hear it. Simon, are you ready now?
No. I think he's frozen.
Frozen, yeah. Would anyone else like to come in and just say a little bit about themselves, or even if it's just how you felt today? Luke?
Yeah, I just wanted to, well, it was just to thank both of you for your stories, and actually even I feel almost a bit embarrassed to sort of draw any parallels with either of your stories, really, but with Hamish certainly having not really understanding where you belong And from my point of view, it's completely out of privilege going away at boarding school. So I'm definitely not trying to draw a parallel, but it's strange when you go away to school and people ask where you're from. I'm not really from anywhere. I just sort of like a vague answer of I'm from a particular region of the UK. It's easier than saying I'm from a particular town. So I really resonate with that. And Harvey, I spent a lot of my youth kicking around East London in the early 90s and spending a lot of my time in clubs with a lot of black people, a lot of Asian people, men, women, never seeing any difference between anybody. And then at that time, having a friend of mine suffer a really serious racist attack in South London, nearly killed him. And that was the year after Stephen Lawrence was killed. And just that, as a kid, trying to get my head around the fact that could happen just a few miles really as the crow flies from East London, where I was experiencing a completely different London experience to what was going on elsewhere. It's resonated with me ever since, because I just couldn't get my head around that was the same city at the same time. So yeah, both stories I resonate a lot with. So thanks for that.
Thank you for sharing that, Luke. Simon, are you unfrozen now? Did you want to come in? No, it's not working. Okay, so let's go to our slides again. So we have a webinar series that we're planning. Equity, Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging webinar series. It's overwhelming. We need to find out more. And how can we implement EDI+B into our role and into our work, our workplaces, our communities, our homes, everywhere. So we want to know, what's your story? We want speakers, we want people to come and share their lived experiences, have open discussions, and try and overcome those barriers, how we can overcome them together. So these are the dates. We will be developing a QR code. Well, I say we, it's going to be Bruce. And we'd love for you to join us on these. You don't have to speak, but if you would like to, that'd be great. And we'd love you to join us. I really hope that you've enjoyed the session this morning. And we've got 5 minutes. So anyone got any thoughts, any suggestions that you'd like to share? Luke.
Sorry, me again. I just wondered if it's kind of on the radar with EDI being rolled back and dismantled across the pond at the minute, and so many of our suppliers being big US corporations. I just wondered if it's kind of like being thought about, and the worry that that's contagious and it's going to come over here.
Yeah, so we have discussed this at our network meeting actually, and those EDI+B policies in America have an impact across the whole world, and it might be that some of our contracts aren't compliant anymore to what they were when we set them up. So I guess for us it's about revisiting, and in my organisation we've been revisiting those contracts and looking where EDI+B is being impacted, and also the modern slavery with the tariffs, because the tariff is the other issue where you see in factories and things being moved. So yeah, well, absolutely looking at that. Thanks for bringing that up. Keith.
Just building on that, Amber, we've got connections with ARM, which is our equivalent in the US. So if we wanted to get or try and ask and seek out any input from them as to maybe come and share some of their perspective. I mean, you'll have Karen Conway, Jimmy Chung, Mike Schiller at this year's annual conference. I know Karen was quite embarrassed about the vote Trump in with Jimmy when they were stood on stage last year, but we could maybe reach out to them and just see if there's any people that have got particular views in that community and come and share that with you guys if that's of interest. But yeah, I will talk about that in the network group as part of the program. So it was just so we could use that connection if it helps.
That'd be amazing. Thanks, Keith. Okay, so if you'd like to join the network, find out more, please do reach out to us. There's myself, Harvey, Janice, or any of the business support team, or any of your colleagues that you know are part of the network. We'd love to hear your story. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.